My first thought this morning was that House Republicans were behaving like children once again. But I realized how wrong I was when I saw a C-SPAN video of an actual child in the House of Representatives sitting behind his father yesterday while his father spoke to an empty House chamber.
Regardless of one's opinion of the current Republican nominee, we'd be well served to remember the long and cherished tradition we have in this country of settling our political differences at the ballot box. For nearly 2.5 centuries.
6-year-old Guy Rose was just having some fun after his father told him to smile at the camera for his 3-year-old brother who would be watching. And Guy really is a great big brother, because that's probably exactly what his 3-year-old little brother wanted to see. That's what I would have wanted to see when I was 3 years old. It's fair to assume that Guy wasn't paying any attention to what his father was actually talking about, but his reactions were perfect for more than half the country who know just how absurd it is for Republican Tennessee Congressman John Rose to praise the long and cherished tradition we have in this country of settling our political differences at the ballot box. Because on that same House floor, on January 6, 2021, John Rose voted to overturn the presidential election. John Rose said, no, this election was not settled at the ballot box. We Republicans will settle it right here in the House of Representatives. That's what John Rose wanted to do. And that's what John Rose voted to do. And so anyone who knows that about John Rose probably would have had a very similar facial expression to what we saw behind John Rose when he expressed his reverence for that cherished tradition of settling our differences at the ballot box. It turns out the 6-year-old in that video was the only honest person in that video. And so, no, House Republicans do not behave like children, because children are more honest than they are. Today's Republican-controlled House Judiciary Committee hearing was supposed to be about oversight of the Justice Department, which has more than 115,000 employees and a budget of $39.7 billion administered by Attorney General Merrick Garland. The Attorney General got no questions about that budget in that so-called oversight hearing, which began the way elementary school classes begin, with the Pledge of Allegiance. The Pledge of Allegiance is something that no House or Senate committee has ever found necessary until the Republicans won control of the House in this Congress. And of course, the Pledge of Allegiance makes absolutely no sense in a body where everyone takes an oath of office. That oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States has been repeatedly violated by many of the Republican members of the House who so eagerly stood for the Pledge of Allegiance in the House Judiciary Committee hearing today. The Pledge of Allegiance pledges allegiance to a flag, not the Constitution. The chairman of the House Judiciary Committee violated his oath of office on January 6th by voting to overturn the presidential election. But Jim Jordan leads the performance art of pledging allegiance to the flag in the Judiciary Committee, as he did today.
We welcome everyone to today's hearing on oversight of the Department of Justice. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
No harm in a little flag worship, right? Except that they don't mean it.
I have to say I'm pleased and a bit surprised to see that the flag in this committee is still flying right side up, because they want to turn it upside down, even as they want to turn our justice system upside down.
Their Pledge of Allegiance to the flag is a lie. Their allegiance is to Donald Trump, and they have pledged that allegiance much more convincingly than their allegiance to the flag. They would turn that flag upside down in a second if Donald Trump ordered them to. None of those Republicans have any problem with Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito flying that same flag upside down at his home in support of and sympathy with the people who attacked the Capitol on January 6th. The Alito upside-down flag, which mirrors the upside-down flags carried by the attackers at the Capitol, went upside down on the Alito flagpole only after January 6th. Here's a flag that's never been upside down. That's the flag outside my office window. That's the shot of it today from my phone. That's the way it looked at about 6 p.m. today. The American flag, put that back up there. The American flag flying outside the Fox propaganda headquarters would never be flown upside down. But everyone working inside Fox has to now pretend that there's nothing troubling about the Alito flag. We had a right to expect that Supreme Court justices did not have political views that were as extremist as the worst of the Fox propagandists. Who would have guessed that a Supreme Court justice was more likely to fly the flag upside down after January 6th than Fox was? The Republicans on the House Judiciary Committee today did not want to talk about a propaganda flag-flying Supreme Court justice or any federal judge or anything about the federal judicial system. They just wanted to pretend that there was something wrong with the most criminal president in history becoming a criminal defendant after his presidency. The first Republican questioner of the Attorney General today said last year that he wants to abolish the FBI.
We either get this government back on our side or we defund and get rid of, abolish the FBI, CDC, ATF.
Abolish the FBI. That's the Republican position. Attorney General Garland, in his opening statement, mentions just some of the things that the abolish the FBI party does not care about.
Just 10 days ago, we secured the extradition of one of the lead sicarios, or assassins, of the Sinaloa cartel, one of the most dangerous drug trafficking organizations in the world. Just last month, we secured a 27-year prison sentence for a man who attempted to kill NYPD officers in a terrorist attack in Times Square in 2022. In just the first 3 months of this year, we charged 7 members of a hacking group backed by the Chinese government. We disrupted a botnet controlled by Russian intelligence services, and we seized over $108 million and 500,000 barrels of fuel that would otherwise have enabled the government of Iran to further support Hamas, Hezbollah, and other terrorist groups. We have continued our work to drive down violent crime, work that we know is paying off. Last year's historic decline in homicides, the largest one-year decline in 50 years, is continuing. In the first quarter of this year, we have already seen an 18% drop in murders.
And Congressman Matt Gaetz wants to abolish the FBI. He doesn't want the FBI to do any of that work. In fact, there wasn't a single Republican on that committee today who supported any of that work done by the FBI.
Maybe the people in America are not living in a bubble. Maybe we are.
That was Republican Barry Moore, who was feeling his way toward the truth that the Republican members of the committee are indeed living in a bubble, a Trump bubble. There is lying, and then there is Republican lying.
I have given my life to the law. I care deeply about the law.
No Republican on that committee has a more perverse relationship with the law than Congressman Matt Gaetz. Congressman Gaetz echoed the Republican demand that Attorney General Garland release the audio recordings of a special prosecutor's interviews with President Biden about some classified material that was found in his vice presidential papers in a non-secure location, which President Biden immediately reported as soon as they were found. The special prosecutor found that there was no criminal conduct or intent on Joe Biden's part and praised President Biden's cooperation with that investigation.
I just want to get this straight. Mr. Gaetz wants the Attorney General to reopen and publicize evidence from an investigation that a Donald Trump-appointed prosecutor closed against President Biden, while at the same time, Mr. Gaetz himself is being protected by the same DOJ policy that is refusing to voluntarily turn over evidence from Mr. Gaetz's sex trafficking investigation.
Democratic Congressman Joe Neguse asked the Attorney General about the most deadly criminal threat facing Americans.
And I wonder if you might just opine a bit or expound a bit on your work as it relates to gun violence.
Well, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act has been extraordinarily helpful in our effort to combat gun violence. It's led to substantial numbers of prohibited sales of guns to minors who the statutes prohibit possessing because of conduct that they have engaged in. It's given us the authority to bring cases for straw purchasing that's led to crime guns and to gun trafficking to criminals, and in those ways has helped drive down the numbers with respect to gun violence. We have set up crime gun intelligence centers so that our state and local counterparts can trace guns that are found at crime scenes to determine whether they were used by serial killers, by serial shooters, to help us find out, to run the DNA off of the casings so that we can find hits on those people and arrest them and prevent them from committing further crimes. There's a host of things that the department has done. But the principal kind of violence we're worried about in the country is gun violence. That's what causes the enormous number of deaths we face every year.
And Republicans want to abolish the FBI. Senator, congratulations on your victory. I'm not surprised in that you're holding on to that nomination. But now you know you're up against some pretty heavy money on the other side, someone who can finance this, just reach into his own pocket when he needs money for this campaign.
Look, Lawrence, you know this, but maybe your viewers don't. I'm a third-generation Montanan. My wife, Charlotte, and I have the incredible opportunity to farm the land that my grandparents homesteaded, that my folks ran from the 40s to the 70s, and we took over in 1978. I lived within 100 miles of where I was born my entire life until I got this job. And I will tell you that this campaign is not about anything other else than Montana values. Folks are trying to change Montana. They're trying to buy Montana. They're trying to change it into a playground for the rich. Montana is the greatest state and the greatest country that's ever existed because Montana, a handshake means something. Your word is your bond. We got 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we act accordingly. We get the facts, and we make decisions off of those. And so you're right. There's going to be a lot of money put into this race trying to make me something that I'm not, so that they can run against that person because they know they can't beat the John Tester, who's the third-generation farmer from Big Sandy, Montana. We will push back. We will tell the truth. We will talk about my record of accomplishment in the United States Senate during my tenure, and we'll talk about my vision for this country moving forward, whether it's making sure we live up to the promise of our veterans or making sure that we're doing everything we can do to get everybody connected to broadband across this country, including rural and frontier areas of Montana. So, look, the game plan has been the same for every election I've been in, Lawrence. They try to make me into something I'm not so they can run against that person. The bottom line is I listen to Montanans. They're my boss. I take their good ideas back to Washington, D.C., and I get them put into law. And it's why I've been told and over again that I'm one of the most effective senators in the United States Senate and one of the most bipartisan senators in the United States Senate. So I look forward to this campaign. I know there's going to be a lot of money out there. This race is going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars, which is insane in its own right. But in the end, This is a race against Jon Tester, a third-generation farmer, and a guy that just moved to Montana. And quite frankly, I've got a lot of equipment that I've owned longer than he's been in the state of Montana. And to be able to have those values, those Montana values, and know what Montana needs and know what Montana makes Montana tick is going to be critically important moving forward for the greatest state and the greatest country that's ever existed.
As you've been speaking, Senator, NBC News has moved Tim Sheehy into the projected winner category. He's got the check mark now, 75% of the vote as of right now. Senator, in reading about the race, I have read that some people say you're coming to the end of your third term. That's 18 years in the Senate. And I've read from some Montana voters who say they've voted for you in the past that they think you've drifted away into the Washington world and you're not the guy they voted for in the past. What do you say to those voters?
I'd say the forefathers had it right. They believed in a citizen legislature, and that's why I've continued to farm while I've had this job. I've actually had two jobs. One of them is trying to feed the world through production agriculture on our family farm, and the other is crafting good policy that helps make Montana remain in the position it is, which is the last best place. And that's all I can tell folks is that I go home every weekend. We meet with Montanans. I drive a little tractor, combine, depending on what season of the year it is. And if the work doesn't get done on the farm, that means I didn't do it. And so consequently, it's really hard to turn into a Washingtonian when, in fact, I'm writing the checks for diesel we're buying. I'm writing the checks for the equipment we're buying. And quite honestly, making the decisions on when we plant and when we harvest.
Yeah, Senator, I think, I don't know a Washingtonian who thinks you're a Washingtonian. That's for sure. You won't be able to find someone saying that.
Like I said, Lawrence, they're going to try to make me into something I'm not so they can run against that person. They don't want to run against Jon Tester, the third-generation Montana farmer who has a great record of accomplishment in the United States Senate.
Senator, what is your agenda for your next term in the Senate? What do you want to go back there to do?
Well, look, we've done a lot of good things for the veterans, as that ad pointed out. We've done some amazing work with clinics and making sure that toxic-exposed veterans who have never been taken care of in this country now are getting the benefits and the health care that they've earned. That doesn't mean we're done with the VA. We've still got a lot of things to do in the VA, make sure we got enough mental health care professionals in the VA, making sure we've got enough doctors, particularly in rural areas of this country and rural areas of Montana, to make sure we're helping our veterans. Look, Montana is the second highest per capita of veterans in the country. We got people who like to serve and they're honored by their service. We need to make sure we've got their back. You move that forward, and then we've got some things to do in conservation that is really, really, really important. And I'm not just talking about one thing, wilderness or recreation. I'm talking about all the above. Making sure that we're harvesting trees, making sure that we're putting land aside for our kids, for future generations, and making sure that people can recreate on our public lands and keep those public lands in public hands, because it's one of the things that helps drive our economy in our great state.
Montana Senator Jon Tester, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
One thing, and I'll be remiss if I don't say it, please go to jontester.com and help me out.
You got it. Thank you very much, Senator.
You betcha.